From a financial perspective, a small commercial and residential district called Buckhead is maybe the single most important neighborhood in all of Atlanta. Taxes from Buckhead pay for roughly 40% of the city's annual revenues, which isn't surprising because it's a relatively affluent area in Georgia. But starting in 2020, like so many other cities, Atlanta chose to demonize police officers. So inevitably, Buckhead became extremely dangerous. Shootouts and carjackings became common, even in broad daylight at the Central Mall. Instead of protecting their cash cow in Buckhead, officials in Atlanta allowed the mob to run rampant, which we all remember all over the country. In response, the residents of the town attempted to do something radical, at least by the standards of modern politics. They tried to secede from the city and establish their own independent government, one that actually respected police officers and paid them well and took care of making people safe and that sort of thing. And the plan nearly worked, but about a year ago, 10 Republican state senators in Georgia joined with Democrats to prevent it from happening. Apparently, there is bipartisan disapproval in Georgia of any proposal that involves enforcing the law. That's one of the few things you can get both Democrats and Republicans to agree on this day, so Buckhead's secession was shot down. Now, at the time, it was easy to dismiss Buckhead's effort as a lark, as the vanity project of a few affluent conservatives living in gated communities in Northwest Atlanta. Indeed, that's what most of the media did, as you would expect. Vox called the idea a product of, quote, the white power structure in Atlanta. Politico mocked the secession effort as mighty. And to the extent that the mainstream left-wing corporate press talked about Buckhead at all, it was to emphasize that the residents of the town are radicals, insurrectionists even, who have nothing in common with most of America. But that wasn't true. As News Nation pointed out, Buckhead was just one of several municipalities throughout the country that were thinking of seceding. Watch.
There are certain communities so frustrated with crime and violence and politics that they are looking at splitting off from whatever city they're part of and creating their own independent communities. One of the largest proposed secessions is in the Greater Idaho movement. 11 counties in eastern Oregon are attempting to become part of Idaho. Long Island and Staten Island have been pushing to secede from New York City for years. Voters in San Bernardino County approved the proposal that would consider seceding from California. And in Illinois, 27 counties are taking steps to leave the state by passing separation referendums. The latest attempt is coming out of Atlanta, where the wealthiest neighborhood wants to break away from the city.
So it's not just Buckhead, as it turns out. Counties in Long Island, Idaho, Oregon, Illinois, San Bernardino were thinking of doing the same thing. And, it looks like a pattern, but it's one that didn't get much attention at the time. And now we're learning that this pattern is far more widespread than it may have appeared at the time. Researchers at YouGov have found just this week that roughly a quarter of U.S. adults, 23%, currently want their state to secede from the Union. Only 51% of respondents opposed secession, while another 27% were unsure. Now, at the state level, the highest percentage in favor of secession was in Alaska, where 36% of adults want out. The next highest is California at 29%, followed by 28% of New Yorkers. Oklahomans are at 28%. Nebraskans, Georgians, Floridians, Washingtonians are not far behind. Now, in a country that had any interest in self-preservation whatsoever, this poll would be leading every primetime television news broadcast. There would be all kinds of experts trying to figure out what could possibly explain these figures and what our elected representatives could do about it. What are the concerns these people have, and how can those concerns be addressed? Because these polls are yet more evidence that Americans have nothing fundamentally in common anymore. We aren't bound by race, creed, or ancestry like people in most other countries are. And in lieu of that, we used to have, shared principles. We used to have a shared, basic, fundamental belief system that unified us. But we don't have that anymore. We can't even agree that all lives matter, which you'd think would be a pretty basic starting point. We can't agree that only women have babies. We can't agree on basically any fundamental fact of reality. All of that is a source of disagreement. And meanwhile, a major political party demonizes white people as a matter of course. Our politicians seem far more concerned about the sovereignty of foreign states than they care about their own. We are a people from different philosophical universes all crammed together. And that's reflected at every level of our leadership, and it's reflected in every aspect of our culture. Financial experts thought we were in the clear, while experts anticipated rate cuts. Inflation in the United States is still a significant economic concern. Think about it. The U.S. is in the hole by $34 trillion, and yet we keep printing money, which pushes the prices you pay every day even higher. So You can bury your head in the sand or do something about it. Diversify a portion of your savings into gold with Birch Gold Group. Gold is your hedge against inflation, and Birch Gold makes it easy to own. They'll help you convert your existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in gold, and you're not going to pay a penny out of pocket. Make gold part of your saving strategy and buy it from Birch Gold. They've been the exclusive gold partner of the Daily Wire for over 7 years now, literally helping thousands of listeners, and they can help you too. Text Walsh to 989898 and get your free info kit on gold. Then talk to a precious metal specialist about protecting your savings from persistent inflation with gold. Text Walsh to 989898 now. There's something magical about reliving old family films. As I sit down and press play, I'm transported back in time. The flickering images on the screen are more than just recordings. They're reminders of how I became the man I am today. Thanks to Legacy Box, I can access these precious memories at the touch of a button. You can relive your memories. Also, create your Legacy Box filled with camcorder tapes, film reels, and pictures. You'll get digital copies that are easily enjoyed, shared, and organized. It's like magic. Legacy Box is the world's largest digitizer. They've helped over 1 million families relive their wedding days, chaotic childhood sporting events, and even those long road trips. And by going to legacybox.com/Matt, you can enjoy 50% off, but you have to hurry because this offer, it's not going to last long. Go to legacybox.com/Matt to save 50% for a limited time only. That's legacybox.com/Matt. Again, that's legacybox.com/Matt. But the other reason that secession is so popular is that people feel rightly that the federal government does not have our interests at heart. When the government prioritizes citizens of other countries over our own, people become disenfranchised. There's certainly no sense of loyalty to the federal government. Not that there ever should be a loyalty to the government, but there certainly isn't, as it clearly has no loyalty to us. And maybe no story in the past few days has made that clearer than the murder of Laken Riley, which we've talked about a little bit on the show. She was a 22-year-old nursing student at Augusta University who was jogging on February 22nd at the campus of the University of Georgia. Watch.
The latest in the death of a young woman at the University of Georgia's campus. Investigators with the school's police department announced they have a suspect in custody. They say 26-year-old Jose Antonio Ibarra will face a slew of charges, including malice murder and felony murder. Fox 5's Mary Smith attended a news conference following the arrest. She joins us live from the campus with the details. Mary?
Investigators announced those charges against the suspect, saying they don't believe that he knew the victim in this case. He was taken into custody today as investigators say the evidence is, quote, robust.
We are obtaining arrest warrants for Jose Antonio Ibarra, 26 years of age. He lives here in Athens, but is not a U.S. citizen.
UGA police have taken Jose Antonio Ibarra into custody in connection with the death of 22-year-old Laken Riley.
As you saw very quickly, the authorities identified that the killer was an illegal immigrant, and that's an important detail, but most of the major media simply ignored it or downplayed it. For example, the Associated Press reported that the killer was a, quote, Athens resident. They also refer to the killer as a 26-year-old man, but they don't report that he is an illegal alien until the 7th paragraph of their story, even though it should be like the first thing they tell us. And that's because they're not interested in talking about the fact that the Biden administration deliberately lets killers like this into the country. As the New York Post reported, citing sources at the DHS who spoke to News Nation, the killer of this college student, quote, crossed into El Paso, Texas from Venezuela in September 2022. He had been released due to a lack of detention space. They didn't have space for him. That's the excuse that the feds use now when they don't want to enforce immigration law. They want us to believe that the jails are full of illegal aliens that they're detaining. So many that they don't even have room for them anymore, which, of course, is complete nonsense. And that wasn't the only opportunity to deport this killer. Again, quoting from the Post, months before Ibarra allegedly killed Riley, he was apparently arrested in New York for endangering a child. Police sources in New York confirmed a man by the same name and age as the Georgia suspect was arrested in the Big Apple last year after allegedly endangering the welfare of a 5-year-old. In other words, the murder of Laken Riley was maybe the single most preventable crime that has ever occurred in the history of the state of Georgia. All the feds had to do was enforce the law at any point in the past 2 years and throw this degenerate killer out of the country, and this never would have happened. But they didn't do that. Why not? The mayor of Athens, Kelly Gertz, has offered something of an explanation. Instead of apologizing to the family of Laken Riley or explaining why authorities didn't enforce immigration law, the mayor proceeded to deliver a lecture about Donald Trump and the importance of treating migrant killers with the dignity they supposedly deserve. This is truly one of the most repulsive press conferences you'll ever see. Here's part of it.
Humanity is the expectation of human dignity. While 2019 was not that long ago, you might remember the dynamic we were living in the late teens in this country, where you had the President of the United States speaking in the most vile terms about people who were foreign born. And you had that notion metastasizing in places like Charlottesville.
This is an invasion! When I was younger, I was a criminal. And you know what I thought about doing? Crossing the border to Mexico to get away from my crimes.
Son, I'm going to ask you to leave.
Jesus Christ, he saved me, and I no longer live that lawless life. But you do.
Son, I'm going to ask you to leave.
You are lawless, Mr. Mayor.
I'll be glad to schedule some time with you if you'd like some individual time.
Yeah, I'd like to spend some time with you.
Let's do that, but I need to continue.
I got a question.
Sorry.
I'm with me,
Are you going to rescind the resolution? Is that still in place? Does that give the impression this is a sanctuary city?
What?
No, you can't call it that under Georgia law?
What we wish to do is dignify everybody's humanity. There's nothing in that resolution
That's
that creates...
not the law. You took an oath to uphold the law, not your feelings nor your opinion.
We have to dignify everyone's humanity. Well, I don't know about you, but I would say that when you murder an innocent woman, then you have undignified your own humanity, whatever the hell that even is supposed to mean. But this was his primary concern. You know, somebody is dead, and his primary concern is that we don't say anything mean about illegal immigrants. And these are the kinds of people that are running the country and running states and running cities. It's the exact kind of thinking that has festered for many years in this country. It's why women like Laken Riley are dead today at every opportunity. Even when they're confronted with murdered college students, politicians like Kelly Gertz insist that the problem isn't with policy. They claim that the real problem is rhetoric. People like Donald Trump are too mean to Mexicans, apparently. You're supposedly too xenophobic and uncultured to understand what's really happening. But as the bodies pile up, that position is becoming completely untenable. It's always been untenable, but it's becoming more and more obviously untenable to normal people. Jason Rantz reported last night that an illegal immigrant who just killed a Washington state trooper by getting intoxicated and hitting the trooper on the side of the road was previously arrested in a domestic violence case several years ago. Rantz reports that authorities suspected this person was in the country illegally, but they couldn't act. Here's what Rantz reported, quote, 2 days after Washington Governor Jay Anseli signed Democrat sanctuary state legislation into law, Raul Benitez Santana, who's accused of killing a Washington state trooper on a state highway last Saturday, accepted a plea agreement for a domestic violence incident years earlier. He was in the country illegally at the time. Court documents indicate officials may have or should have suspected his status as an illegal immigrant. But because Washington state was a sanctuary for illegal aliens, the authorities couldn't do anything with that information. They had to allow this domestic abuser to stay in the country, where ultimately he would murder a state trooper, which was inevitable, by the way, that even if he didn't kill a state trooper, that he's just going to do worse and worse things until someone ends up dead. And by the way, even after this illegal alien killed that state trooper, the local media still ran cover for him, just as they ran cover for the murder of Laken Riley. For example, here's how the local station, KOMO, reported the story of the state trooper's death. Quote, trooper killed in 3-vehicle I-5 crash identified, Linwood man in custody. Not illegal alien, not domestic abuser. Instead, he's a Linwood man, just like Laken Riley's killer was an Athens resident. The corporate press will do everything they can to run cover for killers, at least as long as those killers are foreigners in this country illegally and as long as they're killing white people. Their calculation is that people will shut up and take all this in the name of tolerance. Whatever their motivation is, whether they just want to ensure their political survival, whether they want to bring about demographic replacement or both, that's not really the most important thing. As a practical matter, the effects of these policies are finally proving to be far too destructive for most Americans to tolerate. As illegal aliens continue to indiscriminately murder American citizens, from college students to state troopers and everybody in between, more and more people are looking to Buckhead as a model. And that doesn't mean that they'll secede necessarily. But it does mean that for the first time since the Civil War, millions of Americans are thinking about it. Hey, YouTube, thanks for listening to the show. If you'd like access to my full show with no ads, you should go to dailywire.com and use promo code Walsh to get 2 months free on all annual plans. See you there.